It was an unusually warm day deep in the mountains of Oregon. Jason and Betty were enjoying their second cup of coffee just after waking up. Jason went out on the front porch to enjoy the view. It was about 8 a.m. and the fog was still hugging the ground. Beams of light projected through the tree limbs. The sounds of birds chirping filled the air. The smell of the fresh evergreen was enchanting. Betty opened the front door. "Breakfast is ready." Jason walked inside and they ate breakfast. They were staying in a mutual friend's cabin deep in the woods. This was their second day there. Their plan was to stay a week and reconnect with nature. They arrived yesterday evening and didn't get the chance to see the beautiful landscape before them. Now that it was daytime, they could see the majesty of the mountainside outside the cabin. After breakfast, they got changed into hiking gear and plotted a hike out on the mountain. Being from Florida, they weren't used to the thin air at this elevation. Even though they were both in excellent shape, the jaunt they planned was only a couple of miles, just to get acclimated to the altitude. They spotted birds they've never seen in Florida, along with several fauna indigenous to the area. They got back to the cottage slightly winded, but no worse for wear. Later on that evening, while they were eating dinner, a loud bang was heard outside. Then another. Thinking it was probably a bear looking for food, Jason grabbed his pistol and flashlight and went out on the porch to investigate. After scanning around their small house, he saw nothing. So he went back inside. Nothing further happened. That night, as they were sleeping, a bright light shone through the window. It was so bright, it woke Betty up. The light was very intense, like a very powerful floodlight. A low hum also filled the air. She got up to look out the window. When she did, the light felt warm, like sunlight. She turned back toward Jason. Jason, wake up. Something weird is going on." Jason opened his eyes, and the radiant light made him squint his eyes nearly shut. "What the hell?" he complained as he shielded his eyes from the blazing shine. He rolled out of bed and made his way to the window. They both looked out the window into the dazzling glow. All they could see was the illumination. But they heard some movement. Something was walking around outside their cabin. He grabbed his gun and opened the front door to look around. As he did, the light grew dimmer and the hum disappeared. Figuring it was either campers that were lost or someone poaching nearby, they blew it off and went back to bed. I don't think I would have blown it off as easily. The next morning, Jason went outside to look around. Surprisingly, he found some tracks. They weren't normal tracks, though. These looked like huge bare feet, 16 inches long, at least. He took pictures of the prints and went back inside to show Betty. She was stunned. She said, "Those look like Bigfoot tracks." "Well, they have been seen a lot in this area," Jason replied. Yeah, pretty much everywhere in Washington and Oregon. Jason started researching the area on his phone. The Wi-Fi was a little sketchy this far into the woods, but it was enough to get the job done. He found a site that showed where the recent reported sightings of Bigfoot are in the area. There were several pinpoints within a mile of their location. Breaking it down a little, he discovered that the area averaged one sighting every week, sometimes two. Having their accommodations sit in the middle of a Bigfoot hotspot wasn't their intention. But if they were looking for some adventure, it worked out. The nights got very cold on the mountain, so Jason decided to chop some wood for their fireplace. As he was hacking away at the wood, he heard something come from the forest. It sounded like someone banging a stick on a tree trunk. He stopped and listened for a minute. The wooden thumps sounded like Morse code. He didn't know Morse code, but could tell it had long and short pauses between the bangs. It was too big and loud to be a woodpecker, unless the woodpecker was the size of a pterodactyl. After a few minutes, the banging stopped. He finished cutting the wood and carried it in beside the fireplace. He told Betty about the noises he heard. She said it was probably some campers cutting wood themselves for their campfire. He agreed and dismissed it. You know, these campers sure do make a hell of a lot of noise. That night, as they were sitting in front of the fireplace, having an adult beverage, they heard some movement outside again. Jason picked up his flashlight and gun and went outside to check it out. As he was sweeping left and right with the flashlight, he saw something out of the corner of his eye. It was a bright orange orb. It was hovering in the woods about 50 feet away. It was the size of a basketball. The orange glow pulsated against the dark woods. When he shined his light in its direction, it vanished. Suddenly, he heard the crunching of leaves. It sounded like someone walking around in the woods with no flashlight. He frantically scanned the area with his light. He saw some tree limbs moving, but didn't see what it was. He rushed back inside and locked the door. "What is it?" "I saw something moving in the trees. I didn't get a good look at it, though." Should we just leave?" "No, it doesn't seem aggressive. More like curious." "Yeah, curious, right." Several hours and drinks later, they crashed out in the living room. As they were sleeping, Betty started talking in her sleep. At first, it was just incoherent mumbling. Then it turned into a full-on conversation. It was enough to wake up Jason. He listened to the one-sided conversation. "No, we mean you no harm. Just a few more days. Of course, we love animals. Well, for self-defense." Jason started piecing together the chat Betty was having with herself. It was strange because it sounded like she was answering questions from someone or something. She eventually stopped talking and Jason went back to sleep. The next day, Jason asked, "Who were you talking to last night in your sleep?"
"I'm not sure. They were like a bright silhouette. I couldn't make out any details."
Later that afternoon, they decided to go for another hike. They geared up and took off. The countryside was beautiful, and the fresh air was breathtaking. That's because of the altitude. As they were walking along the trail, Jason noticed some hair stuck to a bush along the side. He checked it out. It was dark brown, matted, and smelled awful. It smelled like a skunk that fell into a porta potty. He pocketed the foul fur, and they continued. Further on, Betty spotted what looked like a crude teepee made of tree limbs. She noticed little patches of the same hair Jason had found earlier stuck to the branches. It's a Bigfoot house. They turned to head back when they heard a definitive roar of something. It was nothing they had ever heard before. It sent chills down their spines, and they hastily made for their cabin. They could see the light from the cabin peeking through the trees of the forest. As they were about to break through to the clearing of the cabin, they heard movement coming from behind them. They both froze. The walking sound continued. So get ready to activate beast mode. They slowly turned around and saw an orange glowing orb floating behind them about 20 feet away. Jason yelled, "Go! Get in the house and lock the door!"
"What about you?"
"I'll be fine. I've got my gun with me." She hesitantly obeyed. He heard her lock the door. At that time, he spun around and aimed his gun, but the orb was gone. As he quickly panned back and forth with his flashlight, he heard movement again. He stopped the flashlight in the area of the movement. He could see tree limbs about 5 or 6 feet off the ground moving, but didn't see what was moving them. He fired up in the air to scare off whatever it was. The movement stopped. "It must have worked," he thought. "Sounds like it." As he turned around and headed into the clearing, he noticed a bright light in the sky. It was several thousand feet up. It had pulsating blue and orange lights. Mesmerized, he just stood there and stared at it. As he stared at it, he heard a voice inside his head.
"Do not be afraid. We will not harm you. You are one of us."
Confused and not paying attention, the UFO in the sky got much bigger. It appeared to be right over top of him, about 100 feet. He could clearly see that it was oval-shaped and very bright. Oh, like one of those Tic Tac UFOs. Betty called out from the cabin.
"What's going on? Are you okay?"
Spellbound, he didn't answer. He felt like he was in a trance. He sensed himself going to sleep. In what seemed like a second, he woke up lying on the ground, with Betty yelling for him in the background. He responded, I'm okay. I just fell asleep." She rushed over to him. She helped him up and back to the cottage. He looked at the time. 3 hours had passed, but it felt like seconds. Betty said,
I saw the light engulf your body, then you and the light disappeared. I went looking for you, but I couldn't find you. I was about to call the police when I saw the bright light again. I raced outside and saw the light fade away. You were laying right where it faded away. Oh my God, you smell horrible.
He stumbled to his feet and went to take a shower. Yeah, camping will make you stinky. As he got out of the shower and was drying off, Betty came in to check on him. He smelled a little better, but she could still smell the wet dog scent she smelled earlier. He walked back into the kitchen and popped open a beer. As he was drinking it, Betty noticed 3 red marks near his armpit. She looked at it closer. They were in the shape of a triangle. When she touched it, Jason felt a burning sensation. Ouch, that burns! She took a picture of it and showed it to him. What the hell? He said. As they were looking at the picture, they heard some sort of animal call outside. Probably not an animal. They went to check it out. As they looked around, they saw what looked like several giant blurry pixelations moving around in the forest. It reminded them of the Predator movie. Ooh, I know what that means. He pointed his gun at one of the pixelations and fired his pistol. It didn't fire. He tried again, but it still didn't fire. He continued to search the area. The movement and pixelations had stopped. On the ground, Betty noticed several huge footprints in the dirt driveway. They were way too big to be human. Jason had seen TV shows with these before. These were Bigfoot prints. Lots of them. They were of different sizes, like there were several of them, like a Bigfoot family. They didn't have any plaster to make a cast, so he took numerous pictures. Having a theory, he smoothed out the dirt in a wide area. With a stick, he wrote in the dirt, "Who are you?" Betty said incredulously,
Do you really think they'll write back?
"It's hard to tell. We've seen and heard some pretty crazy shit, so I wouldn't put it past them." They went back inside and tried to relax. They need another drink. Or 2. Later that night, while they were sleeping, Betty heard some commotion outside. She quietly got up and peeked out the window. She saw a hairy creature about 8 or 9 feet tall, lumbering around the driveway. She turned to wake up Jason, but realized he was gone. Panic starting to set in, she turned back to the driveway. The Bigfoot was carrying small stones and laying them out in a pattern on the driveway. What's he doing? Playing Scrabble? After about an hour, the Bigfoot shuffled off into the woods. Too scared to go out alone in the dark, she decided to wait until morning. She woke up hoping Jason would be laying beside of her. He wasn't. But an inordinate amount of hair was on his side of the bed. He must have ran out of Propecia. She brushed it off and went outside. She went to where Jason had stick-written the message earlier. It was partially rubbed out by the huge footprints. The rocks that were laid there from the Bigfoot seemed to spell something. She stepped back a little to read it. It said, Jason.